I'm here to talk about advocacy, but one of the things that I really want to also talk about is health literacy. Did you know that roughly 250,000 people die a year due to misdiagnosis? But how many of those people die due to misunderstanding? We have to be health literate in order to advocate for ourselves and others. So what is health literacy? Personal literacy is the degree to which individuals have the ability to find, understand, and use information and services to inform and make health-related decisions and actions for themselves and others. So I want to tell you a story about health illiteracy, a very personal story. I had a friend that was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was roughly 8 years old. And her mom was a college professor and expected her to handle it on her own at 8 years old. Growing up several times, because she wasn't capable of handling it on her own, she ended up in a diabetic coma that lasted weeks at a time. By the time she was 18, she needed a pancreas and kidney transplants. This is all due to the fact that even though she was given information, she wasn't able to understand the importance of that information in order to advocate for herself because she was so young at the time. Her mother truly should have been her advocate, but her mother made it her job. By the time she turned 19, she was able to get a kidney and pancreas transplant. And after several years, her kidney started failing. And she went to her mother and asked for her mom's kidney, for her mom to share a kidney, and her mom said no, believe it or not. And her sister ended up giving her a kidney, but she rejected her sister's kidney. So for years, she was on dialysis. She did not have a normal life at all. She wasn't, whenever you're in dialysis 3 times a week in order to survive, you can't, hold a regular job. Just recently, and she was a lifelong friend. She went in to have a port changed, something that she had done numerous times, and it threw a blood clot and she died. And if she had just been able to advocate for herself when she was so young, she could still be here today, and her life could have been 100% different. So I just want to make sure that you all understand how important education is and using it to help yourselves regarding any condition that you have. I also wanted to tell you my own personal story. And I'm not someone that sits back. But whenever I was diagnosed, I had a very good endocrinologist that diagnosed me. And right after my pituitary surgery, I had gone to another state in the U.S. for my pituitary surgery, and I'd come back, and my endocrinologist had actually moved. And I didn't understand at the time, because I was new in this journey, that not all endocrinologists were created equal. So I just got in on my insurance and found one of the closest endocrinologists to me, and every one of my symptoms were back within 2 months. And I went to this new endocrinologist, and I had complained, and he had the oral glucose tolerance test for growth hormone performed. And I had said, I'm gaining weight again, I can't bend my fingers, I was looking worse again, and I was having headaches, all these different issues. And I went to him literally on a monthly basis. And he told me to go to Weight Watchers. And he discounted every single one of those symptoms. And after about 6 months of this, I finally said to myself, I can't live this way anymore. So I decided to go to my third endocrinologist. And it took 4 months to get in to see that endocrinologist because he was experienced. But on my first appointment with that gentleman, he said to me, how does Dr. Such and Such say that you're doing? And I said to him, he says I'm fine, but I'm telling you right now, there's something very, very wrong. Every one of my symptoms are back. I am not well. And he looked at me and he said, well, do you know that according to the oral glucose tolerance test that you did 9 months ago, you should have been on medications this entire time to treat your disease. If I had just had the knowledge, I could have helped myself 9 months earlier and not suffered for those 9 months. Over the years, especially with the oral glucose tolerance test, those levels of considered in remission have been lowered from 10 to 5, to 1, and now it's 0.4. And the second doctor that I was seeing wasn't up to date. And I suffered needlessly. So I want to make sure that you all realize it is extremely important to make sure that you see doctors that are up to date and that, can be your best advocate for you. And make sure that you're knowledgeable regarding what's going on within your disease. I know that they don't have a lot of time with you, so it's your job to educate yourselves. And I think every single patient here needs to give themselves a round of applause for trying to help themselves and educate themselves, because education is the best thing that you can do as a patient. So I wanted to tell you about why I started to advocate. When I finally received my diagnosis, I went looking for information regarding acromegaly. I was diagnosed in 2005, and there wasn't much out there. There was one patient support system in the US, and it was supposed to be protected. They charged fees for materials. I really thought that it was a protected space. But I've always felt like being a patient, you should not have to pay to be educated regarding the disease that you have. So I went to this right after I had had my surgery. I had my surgery done at MD Anderson in Texas, and I live up in the northeastern corner of Oklahoma, roughly 11 hours away. And I had a couple questions. I had had a CSF leak right after I had left the hospital. 8 days later, a gush of blood came out of my nose. And as I was getting on the plane to come back, and I just wanted to get online and see if that was normal. And so I went on to what was supposed to be this protected site. And the first thing that I read after my pituitary surgery was where someone had gotten on and said, big hands, big feet, sounds like a bunch of big fuglies to me. And being a female with this disease, I cried for 2 days. I had just had pituitary surgery. I'm sure I was hormonal to begin with. But I literally cried for 2 days. I didn't ask my question. 2 days later, I composed myself, and I got back on. The comment was still there. And I messaged the admin of that site, and I said, this is harmful. Will you please remove this? And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes the crazies get by me." And I decided right then that if I ever ran a support group, the crazies weren't going to get by me. And, you know, I was at a turning point in my life, in my opinion. And I said, this will never happen again. Whenever I started a women's only group, that's when we started interviewing every single person before we let them in. And I know that that might seem like overkill, but we can't allow something like this to happen to someone else. So, like I said, I started up the women's only group. I decided that moving forward, you know, we only allow medical journal articles. We have to know that it's true science that's being posted within our groups. But that, you know, these groups are good to have honest and open conversations regarding acromegaly, which, you know, that's why we started up. And I know that Deanna has followed our lead, you know, women's only. She has a women's only Canada group, for those of you that do not know. And the men's only. We have that in the U.S. also. And the family, and yes. Sometimes, you know, family members, when family members request entrance, we always ask the patient, is it okay for them to be in this group? And often we hear, no, I don't want them in there. I don't want them to know how much I suffer. That's why the family and loved ones group was made, because they deserve support too. Whenever I originally did the women's only group, it's because I didn't want to talk about loss of menses or facial hair or any of those issues in front of the guys. And for the men, you know, men don't want to talk about testosterone issues in front of the women. And so, you know, you need to use these smaller groups to really address the hard questions that you want to, you know, with others that understand. In 2008, we were very small, and right now within the U.S., our group is about 3,600 patients. And I don't say that lightly because, like I said, just like Deanna, we interview every single person. We have almost 700 in the queue right now because they don't answer our questions properly. And if they can't answer our questions properly, they don't need to be in our group. So I just want to put some things in about how to be your best advocate. Make sure all the information you promote is from credible sources. I can't say this enough. It's got to be from credible sources, such as medical journals, reputable sites such as Pituitary World News or acromegalycommunity.org. We have physicians that review these sites. JD works with Louis Blevins at UCSF, which is a physician. I have several physicians on my board that also reviews my site. Be part of the discussion, join advisory boards if possible. I don't know how common that is here in Canada, but in the US, most pharmaceutical companies set up advisory boards because they need to hear what the unmet needs are within acromegaly in order to try to help address them. Become health literate and start to advocate for yourself. Use advocacy tools. On our website, we have a patient toolkit. We have tools like a medical notebook to gather necessary information, questions to ask your medical team, acromegaly apps to track symptoms. Pfizer put out the Acro Tracker. If you're having symptoms in between your meetings with your physician, if you're not familiar with that app, you can rate your symptoms. And that gives you tangible evidence to take in to your physician and say, I need you to help me more. This isn't enough, what you're doing. And try to spread awareness. The only way that we're going to get more people diagnosed sooner, if not using artificial intelligence, is awareness. Someone has to know about acromegaly in order to diagnose acromegaly. And I know that for years there's been somewhat of even a shame of having this disease. And let me tell you, you shouldn't be ashamed. This is something that happened to you. This is not your fault. But in my opinion, it's our duty to come forward and try to help others in the future regarding this disease. Don't you wish that you were diagnosed sooner? It could have changed the outcome for every single one of us in this room if we had been diagnosed sooner. If you see someone that you suspect with acromegaly, be kind, but say something. And if you can, volunteer in the medical field. I don't know if they have these programs here in Canada, but in the US, Johns Hopkins and Stanford, they have a wonderful program where they bring in a patient once a month and they bring in fellows. And the patient tells their experience and they can look at the patient, but the patient's not allowed to tell them what's wrong with them. And it's up to them to figure it out. And, you know, if they're not doing that here in Canada, they need to. I'm sure there are people in this room that would volunteer to do that. We have a patient that's done it at Johns Hopkins many, many, many times. He's done about 300 physicians. They've diagnosed it 3 times. But the thing is, those 297 will remember. So it's making a difference. So recapping, you've got to educate yourself, which I commend every single person here for being here, because education, what Deanna is doing, I don't know how many of you know this, but I give out a Princess Award for advocacy, and Deanna was one of my recipients of this. I commend her for what she's doing here in Canada. You've got to educate yourself. Be comfortable speaking up to your healthcare provider. Use that acro tracker, because, or if you don't have an acro tracker, put it on a calendar and say, I had a headache this day, this day, this day. Soft tissue swelling is bad this day, this day. Joints hurt. You know, keep track of those symptoms. You have to have tangible evidence to take in with you to your physician. Be sure that you're communicating effectively. You can make a difference in your own journey. You're supposed to be the pilot of this boat, and you've got to take control. You know, work with others if you're given the chance, and make opportunities for awareness. You know, it's never too late to start to advocate for yourself. And what would you like to see more within these communities that we've built within the Canadian? You know, I know that Deanna is doing the survey at the end of the day. You know, if you want more sessions, you know, what you need to speak up about what you truly feel could help you at the end of the day, because we'll do our best to try to provide it for you. And, you know, be sure and use those tools. Be sure and go to the Acromegaly Canada website. You know, we're here to try to help you, but we need you to also advocate. Thank you. you.